Hello, I hope you are doing well. Um, I'm with Natalia and Mauricio, and today we present some key ideas from Silkang's NG's article, Language and Power. Okay, we look at how language shapes power in society, how it influences identity, authority, and relationships. And we'll focus especially on how language and power are connected. Okay, and okay, language is for communication and power. So I'd like to to define some concepts before getting started. For example, here, language. Language is more than just words. It is, as we defined in the last Zoom meeting, uh, it is a system of symbols for communication, and it allows us to share our thoughts, to coordinate actions, and to build identities. But importantly, language is also linked to power. It reflects power, and at the same time, it exercises power. So, language is for both communication and power. Some conceptual approaches to power. Um, okay, power. It's hard. It's hard to define. In the article, we found that Russell compared power to energy in physics, while Foucault said that power is everywhere and comes from many places. So, okay, it's very hard to define, but we'll try to go into this concept and to clarify what power is, what the relationship between power and language is. Um, okay, there are two main ways to see power, according to the article. Power to unite, to achieve goals. Uh, this is view seen positively, and the other way to see power is power over others. Okay, power to dominate, to control. Okay, this is seen as a negative way, because it creates conflicts. Okay, that's negative. And okay, we found that scholars, okay, different authors have explained power in 5 ways according to the article. Okay, the first the first approach sees power in terms of structural dominance in society, by those who control the economy, the government, or other social institutions. Second, another approach sees power as overcoming resistance. Power works when overcoming opposition. The third approach says that power sees power as a potential. Okay, it's a concept of Lewin and Raven, and they say that power depends on the access to the means of punishment, reward, uh, and information. Okay, um, a fourth approach views power in terms of the balance in relationships. It is a concept of Emerson. And finally, Turner Turner says that power is seen as social identity. Okay, group identity creates influence, and influence becomes a power. And finally, for me, uh, here I can tell you that this section shows how language and power connect to each other. Okay, as I've said before. Later, Mauricio is gonna to explain it better, but I'd like to talk briefly about this relationship between language and power. Okay, there are two main perspectives here, as you can see above: power behind language, and there below, power of language. Okay, in the first, power behind language, power itself has no power, but it can reveal the speaker's authority or reflect the historical power of the community that uses it. For example, English is dominant not because it's linguistically superior, not because it's more beautiful, okay, but because it reflects the global power of English-speaking countries. Okay, and in the second perspective, power of power of language, language has its own power. Okay, language can maintain dominance, like English or wild or sexist and racist language styles. It can unite or divide a nation, and it can directly create influence through speeches, debates, or everyday conversations.
Okay, as Emiliano said, there is a relationship between power and language, and there are two important aspects within this relationship that are power behind language and power of language. Within power behind language, we can distinguish two aspects that are language reveals power and language reflects power. So let's begin by the first one. Language reveals power. Um, this means that the words themselves, they can show or they can display power even if the person or a group of people doesn't actually have real power. So the words, they can threaten, they can persuade, and they can manipulate. Now, language not only helps people express their ideas, it also helps people control, it lets people persuade, and it lets people influence other people. So, for example, in a business negotiation, a group of people can make threats during a conversation. They can use words to show power. So, let's imagine that one of them in a conversation says, if you don't agree, we will stop investing in this project. Here, even if the person doesn't act, even if the person doesn't do this, there is a possibility that the words make the other side feel pressure. So here, a decision can be taken based on these words. So this shows that language can have power without needing force, right? Without needing to do something. Another example is advertising, and here I think this happens a lot. For example, in a commercial, people may use attractive words like limited offer or don't miss this chance, and these words can persuade people to buy something that sometimes they don't really need. So here again, in both cases, the power comes from the words and not from physical force. Then uh, power may be apparent, not real, and language can create fear and control. So here again, the words themselves, they can create fear and they can force people to act in certain ways, right? So, for example, if you are walking on the street late night and suddenly someone appears and tells you, "Give me your money or I'll hurt you." Maybe the person doesn't have the physical strength to hurt you, or maybe the person doesn't even have a weapon. Still, you will certainly give them the money anyways, right? Because you are afraid of dying, right? You are afraid of getting hurt just because of what you heard. So, in a scenario like this, you are being controlled by someone's words and not something physical, right? So, in this sense, language reveals powers because it has the ability to produce those strong effects on someone, even if the resources or the force that is being used behind it doesn't exist or is limited. So here in those examples, the message becomes more important than the reality. The second point we need to consider is that language does not only show power, but it also reflects power, right? And this can be explained through the concept of ethnolinguistic vitality. This means that the vitality or the strength of a language community depends on several factors that show how visible and how influential the language is in everyday life, right? So the first factor is the number of speakers. A language with many speakers is stronger than a language with few speakers. But it's not only about how many people speak the language. It also matters where the speakers live. So if the speakers are spread out in different small places, then the language is weaker. But if they live all together in the same area, then the language is stronger because it has more presence and it is spoken more frequently. Then another factor is the support the language receives from the institutions. So a language becomes stronger if it is taught in schools, right? If it is used by the government in documents, by the laws, um, if it is spoken in churches, of course, if the language is um, used in the media like the TV, the radio, newspapers, and many other sources. Um, so basically, if the institutions don't use the language, then it starts to lose importance because people may stop using it, right? Then the social and cultural status that the language has in society. For example, um, if we think of English language, English is seen as a high status language, right? Because it is used in universities, in technology, international business. So many people want to learn English. On the other hand, there are some minority languages that are seen as less useful, and this low status makes teenagers, younger generations, stop speaking them. Um, then the linguistic landscape are the languages we see in public places. For example, signs or ads that we see on the streets. So if one language appears everywhere, it shows that this language has more importance and power in the society. So here in Uruguay, for example, most signs and ads that we see on the streets are in Spanish, right? And this shows that Spanish language is clearly the dominant language. But if we think of Canada, for example, we may see many signs in English, but there is a possibility that we may see some signs or ads in French as well. So this shows that in that country, more than a language may have some power, right? So all of these factors make a language more visible, more influential, and therefore more powerful. As we have just seen, language can reflect the power of a community, and one example of this is English language because it is used all over the world. And to understand this global spread, some experts use a model that is called role Englishes. This means that English is used in three different circles. So we have the inner circle that is made up of countries where people are native speakers of English. So we have, for example, the United States and the United Kingdom. So in these places, English language is the first language for most of the people. Then we have the outer circle. The outer circle is made up of countries that were colonized by Britain. So we have countries like India or Nigeria. So in these places, English is not the first language, but it became an official language that can be used in some places, for example, in a school, in government, and the law. So, for example, in India, millions of people speak Hindi or other local languages from India, but English is still a language that is used in universities, business, and politics. And then we have the expanding circle. The expanding circle includes countries where English is learned as a foreign language, but not because of colonization, but because of globalization. So these countries, they use English to connect with the world. So for example, in China or in Japan, students learn English at school, but to work in international companies or to study in other countries. Um, so today, English is more like a global language because it is spoken in more than 75 countries. So it is like the main language for international communication, for business, for higher education on the internet, and in the global media in general. It also works as a lingua franca, and this means that English language is a common language between people who are not native speakers. So let's imagine that a German person is doing business with Brazilian people, but they do not know each other's language. So they might use English to communicate because, as I said before, English is a common language for many things, including business. However, um, the spread of English also create problems because some people worry that English reduces the use of local languages and the traditions because many people see English as a chance for getting better opportunities with jobs or for getting better education.
We have the power of language. Um, the language maintains the dominance. I'm going to talk about three examples here. One is the global spread of English, linguistic sexism, and in a professional field. For example, in the first one, in the global spread of English, we have these international conferences, multinational companies who the lingua franca is English. So it's the language that dominates um, most part of the world. For example, if we have an Uruguayan, a Japanese, and a French person who works in these companies or they have this conference, they must learn and talk in English because they need to communicate. And then we have the second one, linguistic sexism. We have this in language is noticed when some job titles, for example, like fireman, um, chairman, this is related to men, not to women. And then the third one is a professional language. And for example, in the fields like law, medicine, science, the experts use these technical words that most people cannot understand. If you go to the doctor and they are explaining to you, they have their own language, and then you are not able to understand the illness or what do you have. And this keeps the power in the hands of some professionals. And also, lawyers sometimes political, they have their own language, and then when they give a speech, most of the people do not understand what they're talking about. And this shows how some professions uh, cares this powerful language can unite or divide a nation. We have a strong example of a power of language here. We have the example of China. Even though they speak many dialects, the government promote Mandarin as the national language. Also, the writing script is the same, so people from different regions can understand each other in writing and in speaking as well. And they keep their dialect and they culture, their identity, even though they have one common language to speak. We have also the example in Bolivia. Bolivia recognized Quechua and Aymara as an official language alongside of Spanish. So they still keep the indigenous language and they keep the identity. It's different here in Uruguay. We don't have any indigenous language here. We have just Spanish, and we know the history is very sad here because Spanish was imposed in these territories, and we have anything left from the indigenous. But then we have the problems that language brings, the power language brings while dividing a nation. We have the example in Switzerland, for example, in Belgium, they do speak different dialects and different language, and they don't have one common language to speak. And also we have this little language that sometimes English was imposed as an official language, and then we have this loss of language and the die of the culture and the language as we've been studying this before. As an example of divide nation, we have the clear example of Catalonia in Spain. People fight for the right to use Catalan in schools and politics, but this also create a political tension with the central government. Here we can see how a language imposed can also divide a nation because they feel more part of Catalonia than they feel from Spain. They consider themselves Catalanes, not Spanish people. And here we see this nation being divided, and it's the opposite of China. And we see a problem emerging here. We also need to take a look of the power of words in our lives. A single words it's a powerful tool, and it's powerful because they don't only describe something or they don't only have a meaning, but they also cares with emotions and a social effect. um, Now these days we have this word is narcissism, and people change the way they think and the way they judge another person and themselves because of this word that is going around. This is just one example in these days how words can affect our mind and our way of acting. So we need to pay attention in with each word that we are going to use within a classroom with a teacher, with a student, because I remember a teacher once told us that we are the first influencers in students' lives. And as a teacher, I can see that that is true because they ask us many things. They see us as, I don't know if it's as an example, but they see us as a person who perhaps have the knowledge to help them. And then we need to be careful when we choose the words to speak to them because it can have a big impact in our students' life and the
A
people
clear
around
example
us
of
as
this
well.
is
It's the word that we use to describe our students in a meeting because we need to describe them with a few words, and that may change the point of view of other teachers. One thing that I try to do is to have positive words to describe my students because if I see the positive things in them, perhaps another teachers could do the same. And then we think about the whole group in another, we see them in another way. That's very important. We need to be very careful with words because we are teachers and we are talking about people with feelings and emotions, and that can make their life better or worse. Oratory have a big power to inspire and move people. Um, can create also big changes. The first one that came to my mind is the famous speech of Martin Luther King, I have a dream. You also need an audience to this oratory um, speeches, and you can see if the audience agree or not by the pauses or the cheering. Uh, Oratory uses special techniques like contrast, for example, too much, too little, or less like a government of the people, by the people, for the people. This structure makes the message stronger and help the audience to follow the rhythm. So we have a structure here. It's not just speaking and saying things. Conversation is one of the most common forms of human communication. Unlike debates or job interviews, in conversation, people must coordinate who speak and when. This is the structure, right? And then we have something that we call the turn talking. We take turns to talk sometimes. In Uruguay, we sometimes don't do that, and we speak all at the same time, and we don't listen each other. But uh, sometimes we do have this turn talking conversations, and this gives powers to the speakers. And sometimes we feel in some, let's say, hard conversation that we are losing power or we are having power. It depends where we are. We have also in groups interactions. We have situations when we have a leader and this leader emerge. This happens in a group, for example, in the high school and with the students. So we have one person who speaks more, who represents the identity of the group, or we think this person might represent the identity of the group. The narrative it's more than a storytelling event from the past. It's more than that. A narrative is a system of history connected together. It gives meaning to events, explains the past, and shows a vision for the future. But we need to be careful because sometimes narratives is from a place of victim, and we can see this when we see these wars um, between countries that they are very old wars. And they have this narrative: we are good and innocent, they are evil and dangerous, like fight, let's kill them. And in this way, the narrative builds a strong in group identity and attracts followers. Um, Narratives can be a very strong tool of power because they can shape how people see reality through another person's eyes and perspective, and decide to act with this perspective. So narrative gives gives a way to explain history, and in this case of words, can blame somebody as and can call them as an enemy and promote ideologies with this.